Hello all to the next edition of my Q&A Saturday. It is the new year, 2021, January. So I thought I'd do something a little bit different because I am very hungry and I do realise that a lot of people have been going around and been asking about healthy foods and what to eat, what not to eat, and stuff like that. So you've caught me when I'm about to cook, so I might as well tell you what it is that I'm going to be making, and maybe this will be helpful to you, maybe it's not, but don't worry, the Q&A will still be a part of this. I just thought I'd do something a bit different. So today we're going to be making a sea bass fillet pasta. So all you need for it is obviously your sea bass, which come with the skin on. You'll need some butter, you need basil, chili flakes, some Italian cherry tomatoes for that authentic taste, a couple of small onions or one medium onion if you've got it, some spaghetti, or if you're posh like I am apparently, some linguine right here, and some Parmesan, and because I'm not so healthy myself, but I do love it, garlic bread. Didn't have time to make some fresh ones today, so I thought I might as well just get some pre-made. There are a couple of more ingredients like garlic and stuff, but they're hidden around, and so I'll go through. And the first question of today, as you can see, I've got them all written down in this book here, just easier to remember. I'm not doing the whole mixing around and jumbling up the answers today, just because given the environment that I'm in, I don't want to do anything a bit unsafe. So the first question is, make a team of 5, including yourself and any wrestlers from any company you have worked with. So obviously the first member is going to be me. See, I've not really had a chance to work properly with a lot of people from other companies outside of SWF. Not in terms of matches at least. In terms of training, yes, but even then, that's still not a extensive list. So, in terms of who there is and who I'd like to train with, just because I have been working with him a lot recently, Robert DeCaro, otherwise known as Nick Harvey, I do feel a sort of chemistry between us, but in terms of actually facing each other in the ring, or in this case working alongside each other, we've not had that opportunity yet. And I'm looking forward to the day where that opportunity does come knocking. It'd have to also be the person who asked this question as well, because he's shown a lot of promise, and that is Dylan Pickin, who's just recently got his own YouTube channel. Congratulations, I hope that goes well for you. He shows a lot of promise. A lot of people that I've worked with showing a lot of promise. He's one of them. And this whole thing, yeah, I've been hearing about you wanting those recipes, so I'll make sure to post this down in the comments below. So, the reason I want to work with him is because not only is he way younger than me in terms of wrestling experience and skill, but in terms of what he brings to the table, he already knows what he wants to be. He already knows what he wants to do. He's already improving himself on such a massive degree, and that is something that I completely respect in that man. And the fact that he's done half the things in his life that I want to do and I've not gotten around to do yet before I have nothing but respect for the man. Let's just hope I don't start crying from those onions. But yes, that makes 2. I'm going to go outside the SWF region for 1 second. Tommy Dillon, otherwise known as Don Richardson, in UKW when I've been training there. He's been massive support for me. I have nothing but respect for the guy. I want to take everything that he's told me and everything that he's taught me on board, and I want to prove to him that this is something that I can work towards, that pro wrestling is my home as much as it is for everyone else. And I want to be able to respect him by doing that. He's honestly someone that I look up to so much, just because, yeah, he's a bit hard talking and he's very blunt, but I respect that in him. And at least for me, I do need somebody when I'm training to be very blunt with me, to tell me what I'm doing wrong, if I'm getting anything right, more so if I'm getting anything wrong, and he's always been there for me. And in terms of wrestling, if I ever become a face, he's certainly someone I'd want to team up with. Last one, just because I'm looking forward to facing him in terms of future events, which I'm not going to go too much into. Scott Slim, otherwise known in the ring as James Westney. He is a guy who has been not only antagonising me behind the scenes, thank you very much, but in terms of hyping up future matches and getting involved in it, he's someone that constantly makes me excited for upcoming feuds and working together. And I think whether it'll be in SWF or whether it'll be outside of SWF, and even if it's just one event, I would look forward to the day that me and him work together. Because storyline wise, you've got two people that absolutely hate each other now working together on something. If I turn face or if he turns heel, that's... if they can have good matches against each other, what's it going to be like when they're working together against someone? I think that's a very scary combination. So that's Nick, Scott, Dylan, Dom, myself. I think I got that right. If you're wondering, I'm just dicing the onions, so just cutting them as small and as fine as possible. That way it's just easier to cook them, a lot less heat resistant. Fun fact before I move on to the next question. I actually used to work in the restaurant business at one point. I used to work in the kitchen. I used to help cook some of the dishes in the back. I used to work for a pub at one point. If you're watching this and you're ever wanting to go into the catering business and catering hospitality, do not work in a pub that serves food. Chances are the guy in charge, and I'm not talking the head chef. Head chef was awesome when I was working there. I'm talking the boss. The boss is always an ass. Always an ass. And he treated me as such. I had to have one day off because in catering and hospitality you have to, if you've got a little bug, a little illness, say a cold, you have to take the day off. You can't go in and risk the customers. But he didn't like the fact that I had to take a day off. I booked it in advance, well, as much as you can when you discover you have a cold. And I couldn't come in. Even the other guys in the kitchen said, look, you can't come in. But he didn't like that one bit. And then when I finally decided to leave, he didn't even pay me my check for about a month. So, and then he only gave me half of it. So that was fun. The next place that I worked at was at a little restaurant called Iris. Now, don't get me wrong, people who work at Iris, the food that you serve there is awesome. However, the guys who work there, well, I say guys, it was only ever one guy, and it's the guy who owns the place, the head chef, coincidentally. Massive, massive sexist pig. He has a wife, lovely person, absolutely lovely, and I'm not going to name call here, but in terms of what I've overheard him saying about the waitresses in that place, honestly, I'm surprised that nobody's cottoned on to the fact that he's an absolute sleaze. I'm surprised that nobody's called him out on his BS behaviour. So I eventually was fired, just because I couldn't keep up with the same pace as everyone else. Understandably so, I'd only been going at this for a short while, you know. I wasn't experienced and I was making mistakes in the back, which I'll fully admit to. But in terms of what he was doing, yeah, I've accidentally cut myself. In terms of what he was doing, can't say that I appreciated it one bit. So, in a way, I'm glad that I'm out of the restaurant business now, because it's just nothing but pain and trouble, and I don't want anything to do with it anymore. I much prefer remembering my cooking that I enjoy to do as something I do as a pastime, something I do to give my friends something that I know I enjoy, and hopefully they'll enjoy as well. So yes, I'm gonna have to be like this for a little bit. So in terms of the next question, let's have a look. In kayfabe, who is the most dangerous to the society? So that's an interesting question, because what you're asking effectively is who's going to cause the society the most problems. Now, in terms of storytelling, I think it would be a bit boring if I were to turn around and tell you who exactly is going to be an issue for the society. I'm all about proper storytelling.
However, I can tell you that every person in the society, well, outside of the society, could be a danger if they took them seriously. And that's the problem a lot of SWF is facing right now, in kayfabe at least, is that nobody's taking the society seriously. I mean, look at it for a second. You've got the World Heavyweight Champion and the current owner, and this is just me looking at it through kayfabe eyes. What I'm saying here has no bearing on the actual people involved in this as well. I have 100% respect for them. But you have a World Heavyweight Champion who doesn't respond when possibly the biggest villains in the company are calling him out. Who doesn't respond when they hurt his fiance, when they hurt his friends, and he's quite happy to let things just keep going. And that would suggest, and I don't think he's done this intentionally, I would like to say, I don't think that's setting a good impression to the audience at least, because you're wondering, well, why is this guy not fighting back? Why is this guy not mobilizing people to fight back against them? Even if they lose, the fact that nothing's been done, that's the worst part about it. The only people who are really putting up any struggle against them right now, and I mean constant struggle, I'm not talking about people who just come in every now and then and have the match and then that's it. Daniel Banner, who's one of the few who's recognised just how dangerous the society is, just how dangerous Remus is. You also have Dylan Pickin, who recently has just found out just what the society can do and just what they're all about, and has been on the victim's end of it. The only other person who's taking them as seriously as they could, and I mean just inside SWF alone, is James Westney. James Westney, I won't give anything away, but watch the interactions between Remus Kane and James Westney whenever you get the chance. Whenever you get the chance. Because it all started when James Westney, between these two at least, when James Westney had the World Heavyweight title. Remus still wants that World Heavyweight belt. In a way, he thought that he was going to be the next person to go up against James Westney. And it's not like he didn't have any reason for thinking that. He had been on an absolute tear up until this point. He'd been facing off against people like Rob Van Helsing, he'd defeated people like Wrecking Ball, he's pinned the World Heavyweight Champion at one point, Side Splitter, and he's been on an absolute tear. And then he lost his belt to Lawrence, well, to Side Splitter in this. And Remus made him a promise. Remus made him a promise that if he lost that belt, he'd hurt him. And that's exactly what happened when he broke his leg. Then you look at the interaction between them at Retribution, and whilst not much has been said overall, you can tell that something's going to happen. So that's something for you guys to keep an eye on. That's all I'm going to say when it comes to that. It's something that I know I'm looking forward to, I know he's looking forward to, and I know you guys will be looking forward to it as well. Just gonna pan fry these onions in some butter, get them all nice and softened, and get them all fragrant. Just a little tip when you're doing this. So you want to dice your onions. You'll then want to put them into a frying pan with butter. You don't want to cook them all the way through until they're brown, because then you start losing its fragrance. You want to cook it until one of these starts having the sides, the edges of them starting to turn translucent, so you can almost see through it. That's when it's starting to release its nice fragrant flavour, and that's when it'll start tasting the best. So just gonna wait for this to start frying off, which shouldn't take long. Whilst that's happening though, get the basil all chopped up, your fresh basil at least. Save, if you want to be fancy for your guests, if you're cooking for anybody at all, save a few leaves for just garnishing on top of the dish. But one thing you want to do with this is always obviously clean them, because if you don't, you're just going to leave all the mud on it. You don't want to wash it too much though, because then you'll start losing some of the fragrance in it, and that's when you'll start having problems. Because once you lose its fragrance, that's it. You're not going to be able to get it back. You also want to take off all the stalks as well, because They don't really. They do have flavour, but it's too bitter for it to be used in any dish. Little tip as well, because otherwise you're just going to be bruising it if you start chopping it as is on the board. Bundle it up. Bundle it up into a sort of ball, and then you can finally chop it so that it almost looks like green dust, because that's what you're wanting with this. Do that, and you won't bruise it, which is another way of losing flavour. That you get to keep that fresh Italian basil flavour from it. Well, obviously it's fresh Italian basil flavour because it's basil. Having a sharp knife helps as well. And when you do finally chop all that basil, all you want to do is take it all and just pop it into a bowl so it can wait for when you need to use it. Onions are nicely frying over here. You shouldn't have to do this for too long. It's just until, like I said, the edges start to, well, you can start seeing through the edges, like I can right now. So if you had garlic, this is when you start putting the garlic in. Obviously, having a garlic press, such as this one, really does help. But seeing as I don't have garlic today, the only thing I'm going to put in it is chili flakes. Where did I put the chili flakes? Right in front of me. So you don't want a lot of this because this stuff is very powerful. You just want a nice little pinch, that much, and you just sprinkle it in like such. Unless you're a bit of a heat freak like me, then you put an extra pinch in. That's all you need to put in. The benefits of this dish is its simplicity. It's something that you can make very quickly, very easily. You don't need to worry about it that much. Turn the heat up from medium to high for this, just so you can cook the chili flakes through, but you should only have to do this for about 30 seconds because you don't want to burn it. You just, again, drawing the flavours out of it, which is the case for a lot of this, to be honest. You just want to draw out the flavours so that it comes together as one whole dish. Once you're done with that, next thing you want to do, just get it into a bowl like you did with the basil. Save it to one side, just whilst you're getting all the other bits together. And there we go. You don't want to throw this pan away, you want to keep it. And whilst you're also waiting as well, put the oven on to whatever temperature you want to have your garlic bread at. I'm not going to really teach you what to do for that bit, you should know how to do that by yourselves, and if you can't, then I'm going to leave that there. Next question. Who would you like to cosplay, and would I try TikTok? TikTok I can say very easily, it's not for me. I have no problems with anybody else doing TikTok. That's not my issue. It's just not something for me. That's all I have to say on that. As for cosplay, I used to do a little bit of light cosplay back in the day, but it's not something that I'm massive about. It's not something that I think about a lot. However, if you want to apply that into a wrestling ring, into wrestling itself, it's something that I'd look at. It's not something I'd do a lot. I'd make it work with what my character looks like right now. So I've been given ideas for stuff like Punisher and you know, all these dark and brooding characters, but it's not something I tend to focus on too much. I have no problems with anybody who does it, it's just not on the forefront of my mind. So the next thing you want to do is you want to get your sea bass and you want to put it skin side up first, and always skin side up first, into the frying pan. Because what that's going to do is that's going to protect it from the pan. The skin's going to protect the actual meat of the fish itself, and that's what you want to happen. I'm just going to leave that to fry for a bit, and hopefully you'll have the water boiling in the background so you can start with your spaghetti or linguine or whatever it is you're going to be using. You want to turn your heat down as well for your sea bass, just so you don't accidentally burn it. You want it on about medium heat for this, just so it can cook through all the way to the other side. The skin is actually quite tough on the fish, so it's not going to have an easy time burning, but at the same time you just don't want to give it that risk either. If you are worried about it burning though, you should still have some butter left in the pan once you've done with your onions, but just add a little glug of olive oil. That should help with making sure it doesn't stick to the pan and that it cooks through all the way to the other side. So I'm just going to leave that to cook there, just so it's going through, and yeah, that should be alright to leave for a while whilst you're getting the rest of your stuff prepared. So I know I did have Parmesan out, and I do
recommend that you use Parmesan. However, I am a bit of a cheddar freak, so I'll be using cheddar instead. But remember, Parmesan. Use Parmesan instead.
Don't want a lot of cheese for this, regardless of what cheese it is you actually use. Just enough that you can just cover the top of the pasta that you're going to be making with this.
And leave that to the side in another bowl. Just having it in bowls just makes it easier for when it comes to them being used, and just makes everything a bit quicker, because you should only really have 30 minutes, 15-30 minutes to make all of this if you're really good and you know what you're doing. That's not to say I know what I'm doing. I'm literally just making this up as I'm going along. Except I sort of know how to make this, but shh. Right, so what you want to do when you start seeing crust form on the outside, a nice brown crust that is you want to flip over the sea bass. So you can just cook it, not for too long on the other side, but just for quick enough. Because you've cooked it at the bottom, you've cooked it halfway. Now you need to cook the top bit, but you can't leave it on the skin side up. Otherwise, it's just going to start burning on the skin. Always remember to clean down your station as you go in. If you don't, then it's just going to make things harder when it comes around to you moving everything around. If you're ever unsure if something's cooked or not, just feel free to cut into it. Because I'll be honest, I'm not too confident when it comes to cooking fish. So I'll always cut inside to check to see if it's cooked all the way through, and you'll know because it'll all be white through the centre. Just cut through the thickest part. If it's white in the centre, it's fine to use. Or rather, eat than use. Right, so that's cut through, so you just want to take this off, put it on a plate. Make sure you've got some kitchen roll under it so it just absorbs all the oils, because you don't want it to be transferred onto the dish that you're making, otherwise it's just going to be an oily mess and that's not healthy at all. So this is what it should look like once you're done with it. As you can see, it's brown around the edges and it's got a nice little golden tint on top. This is what the onion should look like, and I'm not really going to show you the rest just because it should be how I described it earlier. Use a cloth, or well, not a cloth, a kitchen towel to wipe away the oils in the pan, because you want to use that now for making the sauce of the dish. And you want to reintroduce your onions to the equation as well. And to that, you want to add 2 tins of Italian cherry tomatoes. Honestly, my favourite ones to work with. And also, when you're doing this as well, make sure to add half a tin of water as well, because that'll just give liquid for it to evaporate, and then your dish won't end up getting burnt, and you'll still get to keep the flavours that you're adding in, just like so. Just give that a nice stir around. So what's happening here, because we're using it in the same pan all the time, it's going to keep the flavours from the onions, keep the flavours from the chili flakes, keep the flavours from the Italian tomatoes, and also keep the flavours from the fish as well. So it's all been melded together even more so. And as you can see, the steam's coming up, so it's time for the pasta. If you're ever concerned about how much pasta you should be making per person, how much it's going to be, just remember, you only want something about yay big with your fingers in your hand, and that's how much is for one person alone. So something about this much is about fine for just one person. Any more, and well, it's a bit pointless at that point. Now it might not seem like a lot at first, but given that it's going to be increasing because it's going to be absorbing water and it's going to be getting larger, it's definitely going to be enough for one person, I can assure you that much. Make sure to salt your water as well, and add a little bit of olive oil, because this is what's going to stop the pasta from sticking together. If you haven't got olive oil, use butter. You shouldn't need to use a lot of it either, just a couple of glugs. Give that a nice stir. Right, next question, I believe. In terms of fitness, what do I value the most? I.e. flexibility, strength, endurance. Okay, so for me personally, I know that I'm not the strongest and I'm not the most flexible, but there's still points that I work on, because I know over time that that's what's going to benefit me the most. That's what's going to allow me to be able to do more things inside the ring and to be able to take things inside the ring as well. However, one thing I will say is that I have complete confidence in that endurance is one of the biggest factors in wrestling. You have matches, yes, where you're going, say, 5-10 minutes. You don't need that much endurance for it. But when you're doing matches that are going on for, 30, 40, maybe even an hour long, I mean, you only need to look at the Royal Rumble, it's coming up soon, and you know that people can last, or have to last, for a very long time in it. Endurance is one of the biggest factors that you should have as a wrestler. If you don't have the endurance, you're not going to be able to keep on going in the match, you're not going to be able to give a convincing performance in front of people because you'll be too tired, you'll be too knackered, you won't be able to keep up the facade. And whilst this isn't so much of a physical trait, this is more of a personal trait. Always work on your charisma. Especially in the Western theatre of wrestling, charisma is everything. If you don't have charisma, you won't be able to push yourselves forward, and people like to look at someone who's got charisma, whether you're a good guy or whether you're a bad guy. That's why people like Shawn Michaels, The Rock, Stone Cold, all of them were popular because not only were they good wrestlers, they were also very charismatic and they were able to put across the story that they wanted to, with ease, to be fair. Make sure to add salt and pepper to your tomato sauce that you're doing for this. You should also have the garlic bread going off in the background as well, because all of this is going to be done very, very soon. Next question.
When I do face Harry Greenwood, what kind of match would I like? Well,
Something that people will probably notice by now is that in terms of my own personal safety, I don't really care that much about it. But that being said, I'm the kind of person, in terms of wrestling, who always wants to try something new. I always want to try and do something new if I've never done it before. It's the reason I want to do a ladder match, it's the reason I want to do a TLC match. I just want to be able to do all the different kinds of matches that I can, because that's just the kind of person I am. Having said that, Harry Greenwood, from his resume in EMW and from all these other places, he has a very storied history when it comes to him being quite a hardcore individual, and it's no surprise that that's the kind of person that he is. And it's part of the reason that he's built himself up, because of that hardcore quality fame that he has. So it would only be fitting to face him in a kind of match similar to that it'd test both Remus Kane and also Harry Greenwood, whether that would be a Falls Count Anywhere match, or whether it be an Iron Man match, or whether it's a Last Man Standing match. As long as it's something that has a stipulation that works to benefit both wrestlers in that equation, I'm more than happy to face him in character in any sort of match like that, because that's something I'd look forward to. And I know that's something he'd look forward to as well. So that's my answer to that. So you get your thinking cap on, Harry. Get it on. Something I like to do with this, don't cook your pasta for whatever time it tells you to just in the water. Take it out at one point and then put it into the pasta sauce and finish it off in there, because then it'll absorb some of the flavours from the sauce and it'll be so much better at that point. Make sure to save a little bit of the pasta water as well, just so it can integrate itself into the sauce. I do love to cook, as you can tell. It's one of my favourite pastimes. If it wasn't for lockdown, if it wasn't for everything going on right now, I'd want to cook for everyone that I can. But unfortunately I can't, so this is the best I can do, I'm afraid. Just turn the sauce down to a medium heat. I know I'm not being very thorough in my explanation, but down in the comments below and in the description I'll make sure to put the full recipe and every single step that you need to be able to complete this dish. If you're worried about the fish drying out or anything like that, it's nothing for you to worry about. All that you're doing right now is actually you're getting rid of all the oils, like I said earlier, but it's also allowing the fish to rest, because as it stands right now, because it's just being on something so hot, it's going to be very tight and the flavour and texture is not going to be as good, but giving it the time to rest like this, it allows it to loosen up and the textures become a lot more smooth, a lot more fine, and much more palatable to eat. I would also like to settle a myth right now. Do not throw your spaghetti at the wall to see if it sticks. Even when it's cooked, it doesn't do that. That's not a very good way of being able to find out about whether or not it's actually cooked or not. Eat the bloody thing. Eat it, and that's the best way of knowing whether or not it's finished or not. Next question. Would you recommend anyone going pro training? And give details on how the training is for newcomers. I've got you, Nick. If you're serious about wanting to get into wrestling, at least into a WWE or AEW level, or even at an Impact level, or anything like that, yes, professional training is a key. Being professionally trained by places like UKW and Steel City and such is absolutely essential and is key. However, I would like to also say, just because I know from the Young Bucks experience, and I know Scott's going to have a meltdown mentioning them, and I know he really doesn't like them, but in terms of their success, they started off on the backyard scene. And that doesn't mean that starting off there and ending up somewhere else, it doesn't mean that it's a bad thing that that's where you started from. If anything, they learned a lot of their skills and a lot of their techniques from the backyard scene. However, they were able to polish it, they were able to learn new things, they were able to learn essential things when they did start going into pro wrestling, and they started doing pro wrestling training, and they went to the academies that they went to. And I like to think that that's the same for me, because I started off in backyard wrestling, and then I was invited to train at Steel City and also at UKW, and I've been improving ever since I've gone to them, even if I do have my doubts sometimes, but that's just a personal thing. So I do highly recommend it. It is not easy though, I will say that. There was a time recently, this was just before we went into second lockdown, where I went back to train at UKW, and the amount of stress that it puts you through, I was almost sick at one point. But all I did was I went to the toilets. I wasn't sick, but I was damn close to it. I went back out and I continued. And that's the kind of mindset that you need to have. You're going to learn so much from going to professional training, and that's a promise. This is almost ready. Find out in a second once I taste it though. It's ready. So last thing you want to do is you want to take your basil, you want to save a bit of it, and then with the other part of it, you want to put it into the sauce. Never put it in at the start. Never put it in at the start, otherwise it loses all the flavour and it just becomes a soggy mess at the end of the actual cooking process. So you just want to stir this in, just so it gets a bit of fresh flavour, and then instantly take it off the heat. Just like that. And now it's time to plate up. Don't try and scoop the spaghetti out with a spoon or anything like that. You're going to need a fork to be able to get it out. Otherwise, you've not got a chance of getting it out at that point. If you find you've got sauce spare, make sure you save it. It'll taste a lot better once it's been left overnight in the fridge and you can use it for the next day. And just before the video finishes, I believe there are a couple more questions. So, the biggest lessons I learned that I wish I knew when I started wrestling. Okay. So, when I started wrestling, I had no idea on the character that I wanted to be. I had no idea on the kind of wrestler I wanted to be. I had no idea whether I even wanted to be a good guy or a bad guy. I was caught, if you watch me in my early days, I was caught in a sort of wrestling limbo, in that I didn't really know where I was going to be going, if I was going to team up with these guys, or if I was going to team up with these guys, if I'm going to fight this guy or that guy. You need to know what you want to do when you're in that ring, and outside of it as well. You need to have a clear direction. Character work is something that is obviously essential when it comes to this, and training as much as you can, both for the character work and also the actual wrestling as well, and learning new techniques is essential as well. And it's not just about learning new moves, it's about learning how to be able to fill the time you've got. You can't just have a match where everybody's just hitting each other with finishes non-stop constantly. You need to know the more technical side of things, so whether it's going through a 5-minute lock-up set, whether you're exchanging technical moves, you need to have something that fills the gap, fills the void, and allows for storytelling. Because the big moves are just there to end the match or to give a close end to the match. They're not there to tell a story, unless it's obviously nobody can kick out of a certain move, but that's a different thing entirely. You need to be able to know how to be able to conduct a match and how to be able to progress through that match overall. So that's what I'd say for that. And the last question is, which superstar do you want to win the men and women's Royal Rumble? See, I'm not the kind of person who is looking at who I want to win. I'm looking at who I think's going to win from the way that they're being booked. Now, for the men's Royal Rumble, the biggest three for me, at least, is Daniel Bryan, because there's been an obvious push for him recently, even though he's been losing matches, in that he's constantly stated he's never won the Royal Rumble. So he's someone who keeps stating that. Maybe this is going to be his year. Then, oddly enough, there's Cesaro. Now, Cesaro's not really been pushed upon until recently, and he's actually been doing quite well for himself when it comes to conducting himself in the ring, and he's been gaining a few wins under his belt as well. Although, even though recent events would say otherwise, he could win the Royal Rumble. He could. I don't think he's got as much chance as Daniel Bryan, but that's a completely different matter altogether. The only other person I could see winning the men's Royal Rumble at least would possibly be, I don't know, Shinsuke Nakamura. But that's just because of a little angle that I think is going on in that Shinsuke was essentially screwed out of the gauntlet match that he was winning to get to the Universal title that Roman Reigns held. If it wasn't for that, he would have been the person to face Roman Reigns at Royal Rumble. So I think if he wins, there's a good chance that we're going to see Shinsuke versus Roman Reigns in the future at the next show. I don't think it'll be at WrestleMania, but only time will tell. As for the Women's Royal Rumble, there's only really two names that stand out to me the most just because of how they've been pushed recently. So you've got Bianca Belair and you've got Alexa Bliss. Alexa Bliss, it's so easy to make a win, but for Bianca Belair as well, it's so easy for her to win as well. Either one of them winning would be perfect. I'm not really sure who else beyond that really has best chance of winning the Royal Rumble. I might be completely wrong for both though, and it's not the first time that I've got something wrong, but you know, that's just how it is. I appreciate this has been a very long edition of the Q&A, but we're almost at the end, and just want to show you my results from cooking. So yes, this is the what it should look like at the end, and I will let you know in the comments if it tastes any good at all. So I hope you enjoyed this little Q&A. The next one, so I've decided that at the last Saturday of the end of every month will be when I release my Q&A. So that's where, so the next Q&A, I will update that with the dates down below. That'll be when the next Q&A takes place. So if you've got any questions for that one, feel free to comment down below. I hope you enjoyed this Q&A. I hope you're all doing well, and I will see you all in the next one.